With the mission to keep as many men on as many guns for as long as possible, we called him Doc. Welcome to Combat Vet Vision. And now your host, Aaron Chief Seaburge.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Welcome to Combat Vet Vision. Hey, this is a podcast where I get to kind of express myself after being in combat, being combat wounded. I'm going to get into that a little bit. I want to throw a big thanks out to SitchRadio.com, Brian Colburn, and Joey, who manages the buttons for me, does the show. If something happens to me, they'll take over for a few minutes or whatever it might be, meaning the internet kind of crashes or whatever it does. So, but I just want to say, hey, thanks a lot. I had a big bunch of downloads this past week, so it's way cool that even happened somehow. But I'm going to get into this story. It's going to get a little kind of deep for a little while. At first, I'm just going to read basically what I put for this because I think it's super important. And first, it starts off with "Let's talk about it." And that's something I say a lot in a lot of my drops that I drop all over the social media. I say let's talk about it because and camaraderie is a huge source of help. And because I say that because help's not always wanted, but camaraderie, that's something that we seek, and I think everybody does. And so with so many out there who will not reach out for support, at least focus on on this. Living in the now is the best chance you have to move forward in a positive direction. A focus on the past can provide a focus that is affecting so many and our decisions now and into the future. It's been a while since I've been in combat, but those who have died or been severely injured would want us to live our best life, or a good and healthy life, a life not filled with chaos, pain, or suffering. If any who lost their lives in combat were able to trade places with us out of the grave, how might they live your life? That's a super important question. It is our duty to do the best, to do our best, or live in chaos, because basically you have these choices. Chaos may feel better in staying close to them in some unfortunate way, meaning sometimes you feel a lot closer to your buddies when you're living in this chaotic life because we train hard, play hard. I get into that next sentence here, but chaos can really feel kind of comfortable for sure. Um, Chaos may feel in staying close to them in some unfortunate way. How we treat each other and what brought us close was training and playing hard. The safety briefs given on Friday before Liberty. And as I think back, I have such a better perspective for society and as individuals. Um, Meaning like those safety briefs kind of meant something different because as we trained all week long to possibly go to war and then eventually go into war, that training became like super intense in a lot of ways and very realistic in a lot of ways. And then we were told, hey, calm down, go out, enjoy yourself. Do not go to these areas because it's unsafe. Um, because a lot of times, a lot of the history of the Marine Corps, of ourselves, of any in any branch of service, a lot of drinking's involved. A lot of um, just playing hard on the weekends, and sometimes that can get you in really a lot of trouble. Um, or it can just be a good time and you make it through and with no problems. But that chaos is something that's real, that happens. And the reason I want to talk about that is because when I remember training uh, to go to war and always training. Um, Most of it was medical. As a corpsman, most of my training was medical, but it was also heavily involved with Marine Corps doctrine, tactics, and everything else that I had to learn along the way. Uh, and going to the field, lots of hikes, lots of training, lots of uh, lots of chaos at times. And then when I went to war, it seemed like, I was able to watch war movies before that. I was able to enjoy things. I was able to kind of not really feel the true nature of what life and death kind of meant in a lot of ways. And 3 times to Iraq. Uh, First two, I got to see a lot of different things. Just the way that we conducted business actually changed towards the last part. Right before we went to war, we went to 29 Palms, did this whole set of training that was a lot different than Range 400. If any of you are familiar with that, and a lot different than anything that we've ever done with all this leapfrogging and quick exercise and quick movements, and we were in the hunt um, to go to Iraq and do what we had to do. Um, and we went in there the first time. We stretched all the way up to Saddam City for me, and then all the way back to Diwania when we all kind of gathered right there and came back. And then we were told, hey, we need to go back again because things are getting a little chaotic. And I went back with a platoon that was part of a security detachment for Colonel Durant, and just telling the Iraqis what to do. Hey, you need to guard this bridge. You need to do this. All these things that we were setting up a whole bunch of different police trainings, a whole bunch of different things that kind of set me up for my third deployment, which was as a MIT team guy, embedded with the Iraqi military, and patrolling with them with two Americans, Iraqis going out, and we were actually working with the Iraqis to really take over their country, to help them take over their country. And as an advisor group, 10-man MIT team, embedded with the Iraqis, different areas within that. Um, Most of it was in the upper echelon of ranks, just working with them, hand in, hand out, and really trying to get them to see the advantages of the military's battle machine. And they had advantages of their own because their tactics were a certain way, but it was not the discipline, not all the other things that you see. I mean, you gotta find value in everything that you see in life. Um, the simple things. I mean, I'll tell you a story that was kind of strange. Um, we were we were in night evolution, and nighttime. A lot of times, the Iraqis got together. They would hang out. They would talk. And 90% of their culture is based off of communication and having tea and developing these like very um, real but not as well connected relationships that had some true connections and meaning. And I mean that in the sense like um, I just feel like our American culture is based off of more genuine relationships and friendships that we build, where theirs are based off of a business type arrangement kind of thing almost. Everything they did was a deal sometimes, so it was sometimes really strange how that worked. Like in America, we get issued all of our gear, um, and that was that. We went to boot camp. Hey, you got your shoes. You did this, and this. Uh, the Iraqi culture is kind of a little bit different. If you want your shoes, you got to give a little bit of something. There's some other deals that go on behind closed doors that you really don't see. So this really, it's a little bit strange, but it's a cultural thing. It's the way that they operate, and it's the way that they do things. So um, so at nighttime they would get together to do these things. Well, uh, we were in the process of building the third brigade area, and some guys. One guy passed out for whatever reason. He passed out. He had dinner. He went back to the barracks. He passed out, and some sort of phenomenon happened where other guys started passing out, and they started having like this mass casualty type exercise that was not um, anything but a psychological situation where all these Iraqis were passing out. These young guys that were, you know, seeing one guy pass out, and then they ended up feeling ill. All of a sudden, they started feeling weird, and boom! Psychologically, they were all in this kind of mode. So probably 10% of 1,000 which is about 100 guys, started having these symptoms. And so they kept bringing these guys back into the BAS, which was the Iraqi BAS. And Dr. Ahmed was like, hey, you know what? Start giving these guys a shot of normal saline, which normal saline is a bag, you hang for hydration. It's got basically salt water, and it's consistent with rehydrating your body. Not like almost like Gatorade, not totally salt water, but something that's pretty close to it. So they just started giving these guys shots of this normal saline, just a quick, and they would miraculously come back to life, and they'd be great. They'd be in there all like almost half dead, and they give them that shot, and they're like all great, and they would go back. Well, they were under the impression that the Americans had poisoned them, and so in order to not feel that, me and a couple of the other guys in the MIT team would go and have lunch with these guys, like literally sit down in their chow hall. And so I'd be surrounded by all these Iraqis, and we'd be in their chow hall, and there'd be like two of us eating lunch with them. And every day I'd do this for about a week, and it was and 10% of them really wanted to probably end us. We always had to keep a pretty close eye, because as much as was going on, 10% of them would be doing some other stuff on the weekends or when they went home on leave. They didn't really have the values of the direction that Iraq should have taken, and that's kind of the scope we took across the whole Iraq at the time. It's a lot of weird things like that kind of put us in a position that I was pretty much every day like on point, and hypervigilance was very real for me. Especially on my third deployment there to Iraq, and then and then the third brigade MIT team, which I was part of, but across the river there was another MIT team, and it was doing its thing, and we needed to stretch out further to reach the enemy, because the enemy was sending about 300 mortar rounds per month into our AO. So we really wanted to kind of stretch it out and push them back a little further. So we had to extend our AO, and we were going to build this place called Ratib. And Ratib was going to be a patrol base where each MIT team, and there was 3 of them in the area, or 4 of them if you count the regimental MIT team, and they would do a 72-hour patrol out to Ratib and then patrol. We were in the midst of building that when I got hit with that mortar round. And up until that point, I felt, strong about everything that I was doing. I was out hiking patrolling with the Iraqis to different things. Mostly mine was with Dr. Ahmed, checking on all the clinics around the town, doing a whole bunch of stuff like that. We went to the schools and handed out a bunch of gear. For winter, it was like heaters and a bunch of different things. But we were really trying to set up Iraqi's infrastructure to really be able to sustain itself, and at the same time we had to keep it safe and go through these processes of ensuring that the area was. And in doing so, during this time of the building of Ratib, it was like 10 or 11 in the morning when I stepped outside on this porch, and mortar rounds started coming in, and the first one took me out. I took over 100 pieces of shrapnel. I was standing on that porch. I was taking a picture at the time, and I was looking out. I was just like, hey, there's some smoke plumes in the background. So off in the distance, I saw the smoke rising. I said, hey, I want to capture this picture. I want to get this whole thing. And so I took this picture, and our interpreter walked in front of my camera at the time. So I wanted to take another one with a clear view of this smoke screen. And when I went to take the picture, the mortar round had already hit in front of me, about 10 meters out. Luckily, I was surrounded by some pillars. I was on a 3-foot porch made out of concrete, overhang. So I think what happened to me is some of the mortar round that landed actually ricocheted and went into my ankle, causing my ankle to look like the Milky Way. My friend describes it as that, and that's kind of a cool way of putting it, because I always want to look at it when they take a picture. But I remember thinking to myself, what was that? A grenade? What happened? My mind was, it's almost like in a video game. I don't know if you've ever seen it where everything becomes blurry and you're looking at your hands, you're looking at everything, and everything becomes kind of distorted and everything slows down. Uh, so I didn't know exactly what was going on. I became disorientated for a few seconds before I felt like my hands were blown off and I needed to see them. And I said, "Hey, let me see my hands." And they came up to my face like this. And for those of you that are just listening, they came up like karate chops to the eyeballs. So all I saw was my thumb and a finger. I had to slowly think, "Oh, turn your hands so you can actually see them." At which point I could see blood kind of pouring out of my uniform in different areas, mainly my right thigh. I uh, I took one step. My talus bone was kind of 90% of my ligaments and tendons were either destroyed or damaged to my right ankle area. My talus bone was broken to a certain point. Thanks, Joey, for bringing me back. Sorry about that. It wasn't sure how far I got, but when I looked at my hands and I could see, part of my wrist, part of the shrapnel. I know you might not be able to see some of the scars on my arm, but you can kind of see one right here. But I had a couple of them. I started seeing blood just beating out of my uniform after a while. Just not anything too crazy. I wasn't quite sure, but I crawled my way back into the building, rolled over, and then I started taking off all my clothes because I needed to expose all these wounds, look at different things. Thought I might need a tourniquet, so I asked a tourniquet to get put on. A lot of different things took place, but at the moment that I realized that I'm jacked up, my I could see my boot was bloody from the shrapnel that ripped through my dog tag into the boot, into my ankle. I needed to have my legs elevated because I wasn't sure if I was going to end up going into shock or what the situation was. Uh, my life kind of flashed in front of my face. My life changed that day. A lot of things changed, and I knew it would. A lot of things were going to change. Um, I wasn't going to be able to do the things that I used to be able to do. I didn't know how bad I was hit. Luckily, a Navy SEAL corpsman showed up on scene. He cut the tourniquet off and said, "Hey, you don't need a tourniquet," and put a pressure dressing on instead. Started an IV on me, and everything was kind of like a movie. It was just kind of like I could hear people saying things, and things were getting chaos, and people were asking, "Where's Doc Siebert?" And I didn't hear anything after that. Like someone was looking at me, pointing and going, like, "He's he's got hit" or something. I could only imagine some of the processes that were going on, but the other ones I could really focus on. But first, my life flashed in front of my face. It was like uh, as a kid, I grew up as a student. I was all these different things. I was my my mom's son. I was my brother's brother, my sister's brother, my this, my that. Um, I was a husband. I was a father. I was all these different things, and I measured my life out, and I was pretty glad with it. So I was very comfortable either way. And I had a prayer with God, and I said, "Hey, if it's your will to take me, I understand, but I'd like to stick around for a while if possible. Well, I'm here, and but I didn't understand it, and went through and realized I had a lot of things going on, and I didn't know. Um, got back to the shock trauma platoon on Tacadam TQ, and the nurses put me in their arms and said, "Hey, we're going to take care of you." And then they put the gas on me, and I was out. Woke up after that, I had surgery, and was on my way to Balad and back to the States. But I knew that a lot of things changed. A lot of things were going to change. And I don't often think about this as heavy as I do today. There's a couple things going on in my mind about it, but um, right now, I just, it's not something I always want to think about. When I talk about the past, sometimes the past is not necessarily worth thinking about all the time and focusing. Instead, I try to focus on my now. What can I do now? Um, and every day I wake up, these thoughts could be deep on my mind if I wanted them to, but I really try to focus on other thoughts like, hey, how am I getting through this week? How am I treating the people that I surround myself with? How am I reaching out to enough combat vets? Am I involved enough to kind of move forward in a positive direction? That's always been my focus. It's always kind of difficult, but at the same time, it's not because I've gotten used to it. And it's like I don't focus on this story every day of my life as much as I am like right now. But to do that, to focus on this, it takes me back to this traumatic time, this moment of life and death, uh, this uncontrollable situation that I didn't have any control over, uh, and all these things. And I was pulled out of my MIT team. I was no longer going to be their corpsman. I was no longer going to be that guy that was there to help, to be involved, to be part of the team, to do all these things that were amazingly important um, for our country, for Iraq, for mission success, for life and death of my buddies. And I'm supposed to be the guy fixing people. I'm supposed to be the corpsman. I'm supposed to be this guy. But the Marines patched me up. And being a good corpsman sometimes is training your Marines to do the best they can on that day. But everybody did their best that day. The helicopters that picked us up, the 46s that are no longer around, two of them landed. It was amazing to watch them hit the ground. And I was on the gurney, and I was just like, wow, this is straight up like the movies. All the little bushes that were still on the ground, the way that they were just moving through the air was passing through them, and it was just pushing. And I just took a moment to soak it in, like, wow, this is just like the movies would film it, possibly. So not all the time are those movies fake. Some are very realistic in a lot of ways. And I say today's modern movies are. Maybe the situations aren't as normal or as realistic as they could be. Uh, but yeah, I got to TQ, and they put me back together, and they kept my leg. They were going to take my leg. They pulled all my intestines out one by one and put them back in. Sewed me up. They didn't need to, but they needed to. They needed to exploratorily do the surgery so that they could make sure that there was no shrapnel in my stomach that had ripped through a bowel, and it didn't. So luckily, that's not the case. But I have a hernia that I got to push in. I got altered neural sensation throughout my body. My hands feel funny on one part of my fingers, and the other part they feel different. My knees and everything feel kind of strange. One of my legs, my right leg, because of the shrapnel to my right ankle, it's smaller because I can't do full range of motion with that ankle. Every step I take is a painful step. I learned to deal with it in not really trying to pay attention to the pain, but pay attention to the mission that I'm about to do. I'm about to go through that door. I'm about to do this, and that. So my focus on the day-to-day occurrence is, what can I do to be the best version of myself? What can I do to make this day a little bit realistically enjoyable, even though there's a lot of past that I have to get past. There's a lot of things that focus that not everybody gets to know. I really keep it to myself. Don't always talk about it. We have a group every Tuesday, and like I said, a lot of my times, the focus of a lot of this is through Warrior Built Foundation and the PTSD Foundation of America. And PTSD Foundation of America is peer-to-peer support that allows us to talk and really get involved intrusively in the mind to kind of push us in a more positive direction. And that's super important. And for the guys that are really bad off, we send them to Camp Hope in Texas and Houston for a 6 to 9 month program, really pushing for a better source of life for themselves when they're dealing with addiction and all these other things that are possible. They cause a lot of problems in life. Warrior Built, on the other hand, is vocational recreational support. So it really thrives on getting out of the mindset of so much bad things and really pushing forward in a other direction, more extreme type sports with racing to Baja, and they just did the Baja 1000 motorcycle team. Didn't finish in the time allotted, but they really pushed to finish it all. So I'm not quite sure what kind of problems they might have had with the bike, but the bike was an amazing looking bike this time. There's just a lot of things. Our bug team, the Warrior Built bug team, is pretty amazing too. They put a lot of work and effort into keeping that bug up and running, but it got an accident this last time that really kind of put it out of the hunt. So looking to get a new build on that sometime. So these are guys that really move forward in that kind of direction and getting jobs and opportunities and other things. Sometimes getting away from the mine is an important thing, but what's more important is to build the resilience to kind of understand everything that's going on with you and find resources and sources to move forward in that direction. And as we do that, sometimes things set us back. And I mean that by, I'm not trying to go through life as a victim. I'm trying to going through life with the intent of being the best with what I've got. And with all my issues, all my problems, this is a great platform for me to kind of express some of those things. And I think everybody has issues. Everybody has, whether you're a combat vet or not, whether you got PTSD, whether you got a little bit of trauma, whether you got something going on in your life, we all run into roadblocks. We all run into like these crazy conundrums, jobs and different things that come up, um, siblings and rivalries and issues with relationships and all kinds of different things. But how we manage some of that, and going to church and getting that dose, and then, but where do you really get to express yourself? Where do you really get to talk? Who do you really trust to talk openly and freely about is sometimes super important. So these warrior groups that are put together, um, that has always been a really incredible place for me. And the reason why is because there's so many guys and gals that show up to this sometimes that know my story and I know theirs, that if for some reason one of us leave or go somewhere, that story doesn't feel like it gets misplaced because there's 12 others, or there's 10 others, or 9 others, or 4 others, or there's so many battle buddies that you gain because of it. And it's all related to the combat vet. That's what we have in common. There's so many veterans with so many incredible things. There's also veteran groups out there that are doing incredible things too for veterans. Any veteran can go, combat or not. But the PTSD Foundation of America is for anybody who served in a combat zone. So it's very specific to some of these efforts. And it's because we can all relate. We all went there. We all had to kind of deal with the same grounds. Did this. Warrior Built's even more. Warrior Built's like anybody who has a combat action ribbon. who actually saw combat and had to deal with combat on that in some fashion. So, but there's plenty of organizations, plenty of things for everybody out there. But even if not, for you to be able to create something like this um, is super important. And I say that because living in the now is kind of like, hey, I can't change my past. I can't change the fact that I got blown up. And every time that I walk, I don't necessarily focus on that I got blown up. I focus on, dang, that hurts. Maybe I can take some naproxen and get by. And I don't take naproxen that often. I don't take any meds that often because meds would lead to other kind of problems. But from time to time, I will take some naproxen, and it'll push a 12-hour window of anti-swelling kind of area, and I'll be able to maybe function a little bit better because sometimes I overdo it. And as much as I want to work out more and more, I can't. I have to modify my workouts. I have to modify my life. I have to, you know, ask people to help me out a lot more because I can't get up as much, or my hernia is giving me a hard time, and I got to push that in all the time. And they want me to wear a binder. And so sometimes I wear a binder, but then it's like it's rolling and causing all kinds of other problems. So every solution causes that other problem. The shoes that they want me to wear extra heavy because they gotta have these certain, um, angles and different things that they got, and the inserts and all this stuff. So, there's give and take wherever you go. And as we deal with trauma, PTSD is trauma. It's also an over exaggerated uh, mindset based off the experiences that you had. It is also, hypervigilance at its best. It's a conspiracy theorist monster. It causes all kinds of different issues. Um, and mine is, hey, sometimes I need that adrenaline rush, so I push the chaos. That's why I talked about the chaos in there, and sometimes I create a little bit of chaos, and we don't, and I don't want to do that too much. Causes too many problems, and so, um, but it's comfortable, and in doing that, we talk about the suicide, the 22 a day, probably more than that because some things are not recorded, but we're trying to prevent that, and sometimes preventing that means really getting to know the mindset and really getting involved with some really chaotic mindsets for a moment, and then finding a way to move past the chaos with ways to manage it, ways to create other platforms, other pathways to a better mindset. Um, and sometimes staying close to those that we've lost means, drinking ourselves to oblivion. Um, Coming really close to the suicide mark, just to be on the edge so that you can almost talk to your buddies, but that's not very safe. That's not very positive. That's not very reinforcing. And sometimes you can fall over the edge by accident, and now you're labeled as a suicide. And I've seen this. I've heard where somebody's doing really well in life, and they've managed to do all these things, but they have these setbacks. They have these little times, but sometimes they push themselves and they fall over the edge. So, uh, and that really hurts a lot of different families, a lot of different things, in a lot of different ways. And I don't always focus on so many chaotic things when I talk about this in combat vet vision. But I kind of wanted to touch on this a little bit more, a little bit hard. I can't even. I don't even feel comfortable going into how the mindset could really be, just because you talk about it on here, you talk about it somewhere. Um, those things can get lost in translation or lost in something, and they pull your stuff offline. So if anybody wants to talk to me any further, and it's important, uh, feel free to do so. You can find me anywhere on the web. You can find me anywhere through the PTSD Foundation of America. My warrior groups are listed on there for Tuesday's warrior groups. I just got done doing a whole bunch of stuff with Mission Alliance. Mission Alliance is an organization that's trying to find solutions. Uh, it does a study, or does studies on PTSD and veteran-centric studies. And the study that they're doing right now, I'll finish up. I have one more meeting, but in December. But their study is how we dealt with PTSD during COVID, and kind of some of the things that we lost, and some of the things that worked, and some of the things that didn't. So it wasn't just negative; it was positive things too. How did COVID affect that? And I think these things are super important. I think these studies are super important. I think um, uh, involvement in your life is super important, and I just wanted to put that out there. But if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, if you want to be involved, if you have a nonprofit organization or something that's incredible to you, your story, you're a combat vet and you want to tell your story, hit me up. There's so many options, so many opportunities, and I definitely look forward to sharing a lot more in the future. But hey, this is Aaron Siebert, lucky to be alive after being hit with the mortar round April 2006. I'm on life number 2. And until next time, strength and honor. Out. Or not. Hey, Joey, where you at?